if you start to believe that you can stick with this, then your actions in the moment will be there, right? You'll say, all right, it's worth it for me to go to the gym, or it's worth it for me to eat this, because you see the writing on the wall that success actually is inevitable.
Hello, Adam. Looking sharp, sir. Let's get to it, though. I don't want to spend too much time on formalities here. So today we are going to talk about hacking change. We've got two approaches. You're going to take one, I'm going to take the other, and I'm going to start. You good?
I'm ready. I'm ready for the third time.
Shh. Don't tell them our secrets. All right. Hack to change. Number one is figure out what it is you believe and make sure that's accurate because, or at least in line with what you want to believe, because it will impact your behaviors, right? So I believe one of the best approaches is to get into our unconscious mind, understand what is informing our behaviors. How many times, Adam, have you heard somebody say, I don't understand why I can't stop doing the same thing over and over again? Right?
Many times.
Many times. How frustrated do clients get with themselves? They'll make the plans, they'll make the commitment, they'll write things down, they'll buy the food, they'll buy the gym membership. And time and again, they get frustrated. Why do I keep doing the same thing over and over again? I would bet a big reason is there's something in their psyche, there's something deep down inside that was conditioned into them that has created a belief that is getting in the way of changing their behaviors. It sounds super complex. I guess technically it is because it's the brain, but really it's not. Let's talk through some examples. Let's give some people some easy ways to kind of take a look at their beliefs about pretty common things and understand how they can change it, okay?
All right, let's do it.
Awesome. First one, I've been good all week, so I can do whatever I want on the weekends. What do you think?
So classic, I'm working hard all week. I'm on point with my nutrition plan. It's time to let loose on the weekend.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, okay, well, what's the belief that's in the way here? Oh, and why is that wrong? Okay, it's not wrong. But if we're working on health and fitness changes, we have to develop some consistency. And one of the biggest obstacles tends to be weekends, right? Like we see a lot of people making some really good progress, building some consistency, some momentum throughout the weeks, and then their weekends kind of fall apart. So what might be the belief getting in the way of this? Well, let's think about what we were conditioned to believe about weekends. It's a time to cut loose. It's a time to shake off the routine and shake off the schedule and shake off the rules. And all of a sudden, that is definitely spilling over into how we take care of ourselves, our health practices, our relationship with food, our relationship with fitness. And this happens to be the belief that gets in the way of consistent behavior through the weekends. What do you think about that, Adam?
Totally. And this is such an important thing because on the surface, it just feels like, why can't I do this? But there's a real belief that is impacting our behaviors, right? We believe on some level we need to treat ourselves, we need to let loose, we need to just change it up from the everyday, routine.
Right. And okay, but I want to clarify, it's not a bad belief. It's not wrong. You're not breaking any moral code, right? For sure, so many of us work so hard throughout the entire week. We need time to kind of cut loose. Maybe treat ourselves, reward ourselves, feel relaxed, let go of the shackles of a schedule and a routine. The tricky part is doing that with food and fitness can find us in this vicious cycle of progress and then regress, progress and then regress. So we do want to kind of separate that as much as possible or in a more healthful way and find other ways to treat ourselves on the weekends and other ways to reward ourselves and lay back and relax and have fun, right? What do you think?
Totally. Love it.
Okay.
So important. Yep.
So understanding that it's your beliefs about weekends that are getting in the way is really key, because you can then say, okay, but do I believe that food and fitness is the way I need to do the weekend?
Right. Like, and the reason why this is so important is, again, because, we think we're evaluating the task at hand and that's it. But the point is, there's this subconscious programming that is ultimately often driving these actions, right? So a good example, I think, is, let's say you're trying to wake up early and exercise. And you wake up and you're like, would I go to the gym or rather sleep 2 more hours? And in that moment, you might just say, oh, I'm lazy, or I'm unmotivated, or I'm not committed. But if you dig deeper, think of it like a chess player. Any good chess player is thinking a few moves in advance at least, right? And your subconscious is thinking about many moves ahead of time, not just going to the gym or getting exercise done in the moment. So your subconscious mind might be thinking, well, what's the point of going to the gym and waking up early and going out in the cold, if it's cold, whatever it might be, if I'm just going to wind up gaining the weight back, in quotes, I always do, or not stop going to the gym, I always do. Like, these are beliefs and stories we tell ourselves that are impacting our actions today.
Yes. And they say that the subconscious mind is actually making decisions seconds before we've consciously understood that we're making a decision, which is kind of creepy and maybe a whole separate podcast.
Right. But think about it. Like, move 1, go to the gym this morning. Okay, great. Move 2, stick to my exercise and diet plan this month. Great. Move 3, lose weight. Move 4, gain it all back. I always do. Move 5, people will look at me like I'm a failure. Move 6, something will happen. I'll fall off track and I'll gain all the weight back, and because I always do, right? Those are the different moves. This is what's going on, and why it's really important to challenge these beliefs, challenge these assumptions and these narratives we tell ourselves, because they might feel like they're true, but they don't have to be true.
Right. They're conditioning. That's the thing. They're conditioning. And the other tricky part about the subconscious or the unconscious mind is that conditioning is happening without us being aware. So all that repetition that you just described in all those steps, right? That's conditioning your beliefs, which is then impacting your behaviors. So, and I don't want to spoil the surprise, but I think your approach, your hack to change, can help with that.
Yeah. So, do you want to give another example though of a belief that many people have?
I do. One that I have personally struggled with is this idea of, well, I'm on track until I ate that cookie, and now I've just wrecked everything. Literally, I go through this, and it's so weird, Adam. I mean, I do this, right? I'm not saying this because I don't know how to change this. I'm just letting you know, you have to be vigilant, right? You have to constantly kind of look at the beliefs that are existing in your head, because as I just said, conditioning is happening whether we know it or not, right? And by the way, things that we see in the media, things that we see on social media, culture, families, this, that, and the other, well, very well, if you're getting the side eye from somebody for eating a cookie, guess what? You're being conditioned. And
right.
chances
it's happening
are,
whether we want it to or not. I think what you've managed to do, and you've helped so many people do, is change their response to that.
That's right. You don't have to buy it, but you have to be aware that it's happening. So that's the thing, right? I see so many people going, well, I ate those French fries yesterday. I know I've just wrecked everything. Okay, slow down. First of all, that's very general. What have you wrecked exactly? And is it true that French fries at one meal this week has wrecked all progress you've made over however much time, right? We have to stop and be willing to really examine what is true and real. Do you see this? I know you must.
Oh, all the time. I mean, this is all or nothing thinking, which always leads to nothing. And, we can go down that whole rabbit hole of, how to counter all or nothing thinking. But ultimately, it's this belief that we feel we need to be perfect, right? That we have to be 100% locked in, no excuses, no, adjustments, nothing, right? Which only perpetuates chronic dieting and chronic dieter mentality, because it is impossible to be perfect, right? But on some level, on some belief, we feel like we have to be perfect. And I think there's many reasons. And one of the reasons, though, is it also protects us from ourselves, right? Often our brain is coming up with stories and narratives and whatever you want to call it to protect ourselves from taking action, right? Because the easiest thing to do is nothing, right? So it'll come up with a story that we have to be perfect. And if we can't be perfect, then why bother?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, being perfect is not sustainable. That's not practical, right? So it's actually so uncomfortable for many of us to stick with it while being less than perfect versus just, doing nothing, right? It's just, they'd rather do nothing than stick with it while being less than perfect.
Which is why when we work with our clients, Adam, we encourage thoughtful, intentional, and planned indulging, right? Like you
Yes.
always say, like, this is not about never eating your favorite foods again. And I cannot tell you how many times beliefs have been blown to smithereens when I'm like, no, let's plan for you to eat that burger
Right.
or that favorite dessert every week. I want it to be part of your forever. And
Yes.
I'm going to prove to you, and we do, that you can have the health you want while also mindfully enjoying things you love.
Right.
The key is mindful.
Yes.
That's
right.
it.
Mindful, intentionality, all that.
Yes.
And I think this is how you help to change someone's beliefs, because if you start to believe that you can stick with this, then your actions in the moment will be there, right? You'll say, all right, it's worth it for me to go to the gym, or it's worth it for me to eat this, because you see the writing on the wall that success actually is inevitable, that falling off track is not inevitable.
Yes. Yeah. So I think it's a nice segue, though, into the other way we hack change, right? Admittedly, over the years, I've worked with some people who, and I understand it, there's resistance to looking at that heady side of it, right? Like, I don't really need to understand what my beliefs are. I don't want to dig into that. Fine. So what would you recommend if somebody's like, I don't want to get into all that? How do I hack change?
Very simply, when you have a choice to make, go with the more uncomfortable choice. That's it. Okay. Let discomfort be your compass, right? Okay. It's time for you to go for a walk. There's a part of you that wants to just keep working or keep doing what you're doing. And there's a big part of you that, doesn't want to go for the walk. Go for the walk. That's the more uncomfortable choice in the moment. Or it's the middle of the afternoon, you're craving a cookie. The easy thing to do would be to have the cookie. The harder, more uncomfortable thing to do would be to go for a walk or call a friend or distract yourself and immerse yourself in something else or have some fruit. That's the harder thing to do. So when you have a choice, go with the more uncomfortable choice. Why? Because if you do what you've always done, it's going to feel uncomfortable by nature. And if you do something differently, by nature, it's going to feel uncomfortable. And that's okay. And the discomfort just simply means you're doing something different. And if you do something different, you'll get different outcomes.
So the really cool thing about this, for people who don't want to jump into the belief side of things, the heady side of things, right? This is actually a really easy way to track, change, and develop new beliefs about yourself. Right? Like I would say this kind of thing is really cool for people who kind of like to gamify stuff or track stuff on a calendar, right? Like add up how many times a day you choose the thing that makes you squirm versus the thing that gives you ease, right? Maybe one day it's 3 times. Maybe the next day it's once. Maybe the next day you have 5 victories, right? And then pretty soon you have a calendar full of the number of times you chose to squirm. And you look back and you're like, wow, I must be somebody who can be uncomfortable and who can change, because as Adam said, getting uncomfortable means you're doing something differently. So I don't know. That's a pretty cool hack, Adam. I think yours
Thanks.
wins.
I mean, listen, I always like to say easy choices, hard life, hard choices, easy life, right? If you're always making easy choices, it's ultimately going to lead to, a much deeper discomfort later on. If you're taking hard choices now, it might feel uncomfortable in the moment, but there's going to be a lot of satisfaction afterward. And I think your approach, which is super important, and I think, eventually has to be done, especially for deeply ingrained things, that head first approach, you're basically changing your thoughts and then your actions change because of that. Whereas with this approach, it's more of the actions change the beliefs, right? So the actions change the beliefs, and then the beliefs wind up changing, and then it becomes this virtuous cycle. And so it goes both ways, but I do think sometimes it's easier to act our way into a new way of thinking versus thinking our way into a new way of acting.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
having this litmus test of, I have two choices. What's the harder one? What's the easy one? Go with the harder one. There you go.
I mean, you make it sound easy. Is that the conversation you have with yourself?
No, not at all. I mean, but again, because it's really important that we do this belief work. I mean, this is where self-sabotage. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, the belief work is, I mean, that's like my favorite thing to dig into. I mean, that's what, causes self-sabotage, right? Again, like if on some level you feel like you're going to give up in, a few months, like that's you're self-sabotaging yourself, right? So we have to challenge and uncover those beliefs. But I think sometimes having a simple framework makes it a little easier to embrace in the moment.
It does. It's an easier entry point, frankly, right? Like, especially when you just want to cut away all the noise and just, okay, how do I make change? All right, simple. Find something that makes you uncomfortable to do, that you would normally choose the easy path, and let's do it. And let's just see what happens.
And the wonderful part about this, that's important to realize is, there's a term, it's called cognitive disfluency. And what that means is the harder something is to change, the more sticky it becomes, right? So easy come, easy go, right? If the change is super easy, it's likely not going to last, or it's likely not worthwhile. But when you're embarking on any change and there's a lot of discomfort, it feels hard, and you continue to work through it through diligent practice, which, as we know, can be messy, and you stick with it long enough so it's routine, and then it eventually becomes habit, like it's going to last because you work through that. So anytime you feel a change is uncomfortable and it's hard, that is a good thing, because when you work through it, and obviously this is one of the many reasons why I'm such a believer in coaching and accountability, is it helps you push through that uncomfortable period. But when you do, it's going to last. And that's what we're after, right? Is that sustainable change.
Absolutely. I mean, the best example I can think of that probably the good majority of people listening have had, is learning to ride a bike. I mean, how painful physically often is it to learn to ride a bike? But there's a reason we never forget. And we're not out there. I mean, I tell you, some kids are really incredible, but I know I had to have like some good firm parenting pressure to get out there and get on the bike and learn it, right? Like,
for sure.
That's why a coach in your corner can be really, really helpful, because they make sure you're doing the practice, even when it's hard.
Yeah.
So, all right. Anything else we need to say about the 2 hacks to change?
I think there's a lot to think about, right? Think about your beliefs. Think about in the moment try to just pause for a second and think about what you're telling yourself, right? The story you're telling yourself is fascinating. And we all have stories. And, the classic, example or the classic thought is like, do you take the victim mentality? Is it everything? Why is this happening to me? Why does my life suck? I'm so unlucky. Or are you taking, the victor mentality and you're the hero of the story, right? I mean, I think that just is a simple, thing you can choose, right? And you could say, I'm the hero. It happens for me. I'm going to deal with it. I'm capable. Like that's an example of the stories we tell ourselves, right? And it's just really helpful and important to try to acknowledge the stories you tell yourself. And then also, if you want to really make it super tangible, how do I change? Focus on what's uncomfortable. And the more discomfort you embrace, the more you'll change. And again, what's easy now was once hard. Just like what's hard now will soon be easy if and when you persist and stick with it, which, of course, we're going to help you do.
Absolutely. All right, guys, as always, we'd love to hear from you. Email Adam if you have thoughts or you want to share with us how these 2 hacks to change have helped you. And we'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Until then, take good care.